I would like for young people of today to know the closeness that I knew in my college years.
And most of the friends that I've had over the years are graduates of the University of Florida, and they love to refer to me as having gone to the girls' school. So that's been an uphill battle, although I think they're secretly jealous.
I think it's one of the most remarkable achievements in a 50-year period, to move from a relatively small, though very strong women's college to a coeducational university of national significance. It's what's happened, and I don't know of that taking place anywhere else, though a number of states have tried it.
And I think one of the reasons that it's great because it was built on such a tremendous foundation, and I think it was also because of the loyalty and the love of so many of the young faculty who came at that time, who remained with the university through thick and thin.
When I first came down to here to FSU, I thought, well, I'll go down to Florida and I'll have a good time for a year and I'll go back to New York City. I never went back.
People keep saying, this is an emerging university. We're going to get a reputation. We've had a reputation since the late 50s and early 60s. We're just going to enhance it. We emerged long ago.
I think all alumni would like to be a sophomore again for one night, because that really represents the best of times when you're at the most free in your life. I don't want to be a student again, but when I was here, I made wonderful friends that are still my friends.
What you should get from this is a philosophy of fair play, of doing your share, of gaining a liberal education, of keeping an open mind, of giving somebody else a chance. And what you have here today is what someone has prepared for you to do all of those things. And you want to keep that for the fellow coming behind you.
The year is 1947. Jackie Robinson breaks the color barrier. Chuck Yeager, the sound barrier. Americans begin taking instant photographs and cooking instant dinners. And in Tallahassee, Florida, a university is born. It begins 2 years earlier as the end of World War II signals the return of America's veterans. With help from the GI Bill of Rights, more than 2 million veterans flood college campuses around the nation. In Gainesville, the all-male University of Florida is faced with an enrollment of 8,400 students, 2,000 more than the university can handle.
I registered at the University of Florida. When I got home, got discharged from the Navy in Jacksonville in mid-June 1946, I received notice that I would be housed at an abandoned Air Force base in Gainesville. That did not appeal to me since I had been living on naval air stations for over 3 years.
The war has left Patterson homesick for his native Tallahassee, where the Florida State College for Women has been an all-female institution since 1905. Rallying a group of local veterans, Patterson organizes a march through downtown Tallahassee and up the steps of the state capitol, where Governor Millard Caldwell hears his plea for a coeducational university.
By 1946, all of a sudden, in the summer of 1946, it turned out that there were going to be men on the campus. The Dale Mabry field had been turned over to the city, which turned it over to the college so that they could use it to house the men. And there was a lot of cooperation going on about that. I think the city recognized the financial advantage of bringing men to the city.
A state law limits FSCW's regular session enrollment to women. And since the biennial legislature will not meet again until 1947, the governor circumvents the law by opening TBUF, the Tallahassee branch of the University of Florida. FSCW Registrar Milton Carruthers is designated dean, and the nearby Dale Mabry Airfield opens for business. More than 600 men enroll for the first semester at TBUF, which soon comes to be known as West Campus. Many classes take place in the wooden Army barracks at Dale Mabry, but students commute regularly to the main campus by bus.
They were school buses, and most of the men could not stand up straight in them. They'd have to lean over. And I will tell you that the fact that there were more women than men had some interesting effects. For example, women would get up and give tall men their seats, and they would always offer to hold your books for you. Now, as the ratio changed, that disappeared.
While most FSCW students welcome men on campus, there is concern the mature veterans do not have enough organized activities to keep them occupied. It's decided that a basketball program will help the men burn off some steam, and the university hires a director of intramurals named Ed Williamson. Meanwhile, the wheels are in full motion to legitimize the de facto coeducation that is suddenly in the midst of its spring semester.
There were three groups. One of them was very serious about maintaining Florida State College for Women as a small women's college with all of its closeness and traditions. There was a second group that saw a coeducational university as an opportunity for women to have many more fields that they could enter outside of what was our liberal arts curriculum. And then there was the third group that just wanted the guys around. And as it turned out, all three got exactly what they thought would happen.
On May the 7th of 1947, a bill allowing men to attend the newly named Florida State University and women to attend the University of Florida passes the House and Senate. A week later, Governor Caldwell signs the bill into law. The spring semester of 1947 has not yet ended, and women graduating a few weeks later find their diplomas bearing the names of two institutions. When registration opens for the first ever session of the Florida State University, administrators remember the Tallahassean who organized that march on the Capitol a year earlier, and John Patterson becomes the first male student in the university's history.
All I know is I was summoned from class in May of 1947 to go in there and have these pictures taken and so forth, and make a token registration.
The charge of leading FSU falls into the hands of Doak Sheridan Campbell, who came to FSCW 6 years earlier. A nationally recognized expert on junior colleges, Campbell proves adept at implementing a vision for America's newest university. He's insisted on the formation of activities that will allow men and women to interact in a wholesome environment. In Madison, Wisconsin, FSU uncovers a city recreation employee who has started a community circus. The university convinces Jack Haskin to bring his rigging to Tallahassee and to begin a similar program at FSU. No one could have forecast the phenomenal success that follows for the Flying High Circus.
Something that was very, very common back then was we performed at halftime of football games. We usually at least one performance at home and several performances when we were away. And some of the older coaches will tell you, or some of the athletic directors, that the only way they could get some teams to play us in football is if we would bring the circus to perform at halftime.
In the spring of 1948, inside the old gymnasium at Mabry Field, the Flying High Circus stages its first home show. Anne O'Quinn is billed as the little girl with the iron nerves, defying all laws of gravity on her giant whirl.
It was a labor of love. Everyone admired Jack Haskins, and they wanted to perform the best for him. And it was showmanship. It was thrilling to be able to perform for an audience.
Soon the show moves to an outside venue on the main campus. For a young university ambitious to form an identity, the circus is a public relations dream. The daring young performers become darlings of network television, and the image of FSU is going national.
We were invited up to Philadelphia to perform on national television, and that was every Saturday morning was the SEAL Test Big Top.
Lots of fun here today. Imagine all these youngsters and all-American circus.
It was amazing because the people that rigged that show in Philadelphia were used to professional performers, and the response that they had to us as college kids, they were so in awe. They just stood and watched us because we were not professionals, but yet we were doing the same things that the professionals do.
Over the years, nearly 2,000 students perform under the Big Top, fostering one of the great legacies in FSU history and the greatest collegiate show on earth. Another activity opening as swiftly as the university itself is football. The clamor for intercollegiate athletics sounds so quickly, the university cannot meet its requirement of finding a football coach with a PhD. So Ed Williamson agrees to take the job for one season. His only assistant is the circus coach, Jack Haskins. Within 3 months, Williamson hastily assembles a 5-game schedule and manages to secure enough equipment to stage practices at Mabry Field.
The other thing I remember, one of the things that come to my mind most was Dr. Campbell, or Doe Campbell. He would come out to the state and give him a brand new 47 Buick, Roadmaster Buick. You know, the university president's got cars from school. He would drive out there every day, never missed a practice, and he would always take 6 or 8 or 10, many of us he could pack into that Roadmaster back because the field house where we dressed and changed was like 1.5 miles or a mile from the practice fields. So he would haul half dozen of us back and forth in his big old brand new Buick every day, the stinky, smelly guys, you know, and you can imagine what it's like.
On an October evening in 1947, more than 7,000 fans jammed Centennial Field for the opening game against Stetson. Charles McMillan scores the team's first touchdown on a pass from Don Grant, FSU's only score in a 14-6 loss. It could have been labeled the no-name defeat, as FSU has yet to declare a nickname. But within a month, a Name the Team contest is underway among students.
I remember we had a big meeting at Westcott, and they threw out a bunch of names, and of course a women's swimming team, which we were well noted for, you know, the Tarpon Club, they were called the Tarpons. So that name was at the top of the list pretty much.
But the football players are not endeared to the name Tarpons or Statesmen or any of the other entries that come pouring in. After door-to-door lobbying on campus, a mere 110 votes elevate the winner, Seminoles. From those early beginnings in 1947, the nickname and mascot grow into one of the most recognized and respected symbols in college athletics.
I have been up to Oklahoma, Cherokee, places like that, away from Florida, and they all are proudly wearing FSU t-shirts, FSU caps.
As the 1940s come to a close, the university is forging its new identity as a coeducational university. Dining halls that had once been the stage for elaborate social training at the Florida State College for Women are converted to cafeterias. Meanwhile, the odds and evens and intramural competition dating back to 1912 is dissolved. Once a traditional Thanksgiving celebration, students now go home on an official university holiday. Yet some traditions remain from FSCW. Freshmen still wear brat caps. and women are required to take 2 years of physical education, twice as many as the men.
Here, a new and vital experiment in higher education is in progress.
In 1948, the long-awaited President's Home opens on Tennessee Street. The house and a 16-acre parcel of land cost $90,000. There are more signs of a university on the move. After 14 months of preparation, campus radio station WFSU hits the AM airways, broadcasting jazz, religious forums, Greek functions, and campus news. By the end of the decade, FSU is laying the foundation of a graduate research institution. The first doctoral programs are approved in education, music education, and home economics. Then in 1949, perhaps the single most crucial year in the development of the university, FSU hires an astonishing 125 new faculty members, most of them new PhDs and soon to be pioneers.
Take my own case, for example. I was 26 years old when I came here. A 26-year-old given the responsibility, the chance to start a whole new department from scratch. How often does that happen? So it was a once-in-a-lifetime kind of an opportunity, and it was for a number of other people as well.
They specifically set out to make these new programs, and they hired a lot of new faculty fresh out of places like Stanford and Johns Hopkins and Princeton and Harvard, and they made their reputations here and they stayed here. Programs like that at the University of Florida had been there for many years, and they didn't get that spark that pushed them ahead.
Many of those 125 hires from 1949 make their careers at FSU. Later, their impact on the university is likened to trailblazers from another century. They are called the 49ers. The 1950s are a time of physical development on campus. When President Campbell unveils the university's 15-year plan for growth, Governor Fuller Warren exclaims, "For goodness sake, don't let anyone hear you call it a 15-year plan. It will scare people to death. Call it a 50-year plan. By whatever name, a construction boom is underway." One of the first buildings completed is an 11-story dormitory for men. The soon-to-be-named Smith Hall is the tallest building between Jacksonville and Pensacola.
And the whole idea of living in a permanent facility on the same campus with the women was exciting, because bear in mind, the men were way out on several miles away. That was something, being able to walk right across the green to pick up a date.
Askew is one of the most active students on campus. In addition to his student government work, he's a member of a men's dance group called the Cavaliers. But their ballroom virtue is lost on a campus dominated by women.
Well, you were in business, if you didn't dance at all. I mean, there were so many young co-eds, and opposite the University of Florida, where I went on to go to law school. When I was in law school, 53 to 56, in Florida, you were very fortunate to get a date. At FSU, I would say a period over 3 years, I probably averaged 3 dates a week, which is mainly because there were so many. Now, I got serious a little too, because I used to, when you got pinned, they would throw you in the water fountain in front of Westcott. I don't know whether they still do that, but I made that trip twice, so.
Like the rest of campus, the football program is also building. After a well-organized fund drive raises $50,000 within weeks, a 15,000-seat stadium is built between February and October of 1950. At homecoming ceremonies that year, 3 historic events take place. The stadium is named in honor of President Campbell. The band takes the field under its new name, the Marching Chiefs. And when FSU scores a touchdown, a new song rises through the autumn air.
I'm a great football fan, and I had gone to the football games, and at that time, they were using words to the Notre Dame Victory March and On Wisconsin. And I thought we ought to have our own tune and our own fight song.
At lunch one day, Wright notices a poem in the student newspaper, The Flambeau. On his drive back to campus, the former NBC television pianist gets an idea for a tune to accompany the poem, which has been written by English student Doug Alley.
Well, I was thinking about the original tune. Using straight quarter notes. Then I thought, well, I have to do a little something different. So I'll put a little syncopation in the next phrase to give that little lift to it.
Wright's impact on the university is even greater in the classroom. In 1996, he enrolls his 40,000th student, believed to be a record among FSU faculty members.
Congratulations.
By the end of 1952, Don Veller has taken the football program as far as he can take it. Tennis coach Don Laux is on the search committee appointed to choose Veller's replacement.
And our committee agreed unanimously that we were going to hire a head coach from another school. We were kind of naive, apparently, because we started calling around, and as soon as we told them that the $14,000 was the salary, they hung up on us very quickly.
On a fateful night in 1952, the committee meets in the Westcott Administration Building, where Laux is encouraged to phone Army's legendary Red Blake, whom Laux had known during a stint at West Point.
I got Blake on the phone. He wanted to know what I want, and I told him. He said, "How much you paying?" And I told him $14,000, and he said, "No way. You're not going to get a head coach for that amount." So he said, "But tell you what, I got a great assistant coach, and he's going to be a great head coach someday, someplace." And I said, "Well, I don't think that they're going to listen to me." He said, "Go back and talk to him." So I said, "You hold the phone." He said, "I'll hold the phone." I went back and I told the committee. They shook their heads. I went back and thanked him.
Eventually, FSU finds a suitor. Tom Nugent comes from Virginia Tech and rings up an impressive record. It will be years before anyone realizes the significance of Don Locke's phone call, the one that passes up the chance to hire a football coach named Vince Lombardi. It's 1952, before television permeates our consciousness, and Life magazine is a centerpiece of American culture. Life cameras cannot resist the charm of 18-year-old Marlise Gessler, a Polish native whose family flees post-war Germany for a new life in the U.S. After only 14 months in America, Gessler is crowned FSU Homecoming Queen, the first freshman to ever win the honor. On December 15th, Gessler's story makes the cover. Remarkable publicity in the life of a young university. 3 miles from campus, students still retreat to a weekend hideaway that's been a part of the institution since 1915. But Camp Flashtacawa, an acronym for Florida State College for Women, is no longer in need of a title that's gender-specific. The name is changed to Seminole Reservation. Many of the professors hired in 1949 find their research fueled by government's investment in the sciences. Bolstered by young, ambitious talent, the university's reputation grows so rapidly the 1957 legislature appropriates $2.3 million for a Van de Graaff Linear Accelerator. It's the beginning of FSU's nuclear age.
Of course, Tallahassee, when they talked about bringing this tandem Van de Graaff here, most of the citizens of Tallahassee, and probably the rest of the country too, the only thing they knew about nuclear was atomic bombs. You know, and they knew about the explosion in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, that kind of stuff.
The control room from which the accelerator itself...
In those days, reactors weren't a big deal, you know. They had, it was just a matter of nuclear meant bombs.
It is remote from the accelerator, for radiation reasons. It's behind a 2-foot concrete wall with heavy steel shielding doors, so the personnel may safely operate in this room even when beams of high radiation are being used in the accelerator.
So there was great concern, and in the newspaper, people were writing letters, about this, bringing this lethal stuff to campus, and thinking that we were going to be blowing up Tallahassee, and it was there was fear, but because of lack of understanding what was happening.
When the Van de Graaff Accelerator begins operating, FSU offers a doctoral program in nuclear science. Soon, the university turns out more nuclear science PhDs per year than any institution in America except Yale University. Landing the Van de Graaff Accelerator is a fitting climax for Doak Campbell, who retires in June of 1957. His reign covers the first 10 years of the university, but his legacy is timeless.
He was exactly the right person to come along at that time, because as I told you earlier, the legislature just said, okay, you people go make a university and don't bother us about it. And so it just gave him a free hand, and he made the right choices. He provided the right leadership. Although a lot of people would have thought, coming from a community college background, he wouldn't know how to make a university, but he did. But he let it make itself. And by the time he retired, he was one of the most loved people in Tallahassee and on this campus. And he would be, I remember, for a few years after he had retired, he would always be in the homecoming parade. And when his car would come down, there'd be a standing ovation for him.
1 month after Campbell's retirement, Robert Manning Strozier becomes the second president in FSU history.
Bob Strozier stepped in as a completely new breath of air. For example, Doak Campbell had some strong personal feelings about the use of alcohol, and he had no problem imposing those on the university community. And there was a lot of dissatisfaction with that. There's a lot of us, whether we drank or didn't drink wasn't the issue. The idea that the climate with regard to that should be sort of determined by the president seemed a little out of place for a university. At any rate, Bob Strozier at his first faculty senate meeting, which was in the late afternoon, finally said, look, this has gone on long enough. This is a terrible time to have senate meetings. It's time for cocktail hour.
And the Georgia native quickly establishes a great rapport among students and faculty. Among the students, Sarasota's Natalie Hobbs prevails in a lengthy contest to win the title of Miss FSU. It's the last time the student yearbook will issue the title, but eventually Hobbs' victory earns distinction for something else. Runner-up in the Miss FSU contest is a freshman from Tallahassee named Faye Dunaway.
I think the next time I saw her, I was living in Hawaii, and I went to a movie and saw Bonnie and Clyde. And I was very surprised because as a student at Florida State, she was dark-haired. She had dark hair and wasn't as slender-looking as she was in Bonnie and Clyde when she was a blonde. I saw a big transformation there, but I still have the pictures back when we were on the court together.
Dunaway goes on to win an Academy Award for Best Actress in the film Towering Inferno, and eventually earns a star on Hollywood's Walk of Fame. Stars begin falling on Tallahassee as WFSU TV signs on the air in 1959, broadcasting, among other things, the earliest forms of distance education. Each week on campus, weather permitting, students gather at the music school amphitheater to watch free movies. It is a time of sweet innocence. But time is running out. A specter waits in the shadows. It will be called the 60s. For all of America, the 1960s are a time of triumph and tragedy. Just 4 months into 1960, FSU suffers a personal tragedy of its own. On a trip to Chicago, President Bob Strozier suffers a fatal heart attack. The loss hits hard on a campus worn by Strozier's winning personality and level-headed practicality.
Many people find it possible to be well-liked. Many people find it possible to be respected. Very, very few people find it possible to be both. And Bob was both. He was very well-liked, and he was highly respected.
The new unnamed library will soon be dedicated to his memory. From the turn of the century to 1960, only 4 men sit in the president's chair. In the decade that has just opened, the number will be equaled. By the time classes begin in September, Gordon Blackwell is at work. Educated at Furman, North Carolina, and Harvard, Blackwell identifies with FSU's lofty expectations.
I was well aware that the goals which the faculty had for the university, and I think the Board of Control, as it was called in those days, the Board of Control also wanted Florida State to become not just a good university for Florida or the South, but one of national ranking. I think any university that doesn't have high aspirations will suffer.
Blackwell embarks on a plan that sees the university's budget nearly double. The guidance of an accounting professor is invaluable, and John Champion is named vice president. $26 million is spent or committed to building projects, including a new student union, featuring the only escalator between Jacksonville and Pensacola. The turmoil that disrupts college campuses later in the decade has not yet arrived. Although enrollment nears 12,000, the university in many ways operates in loco parentis, or in place of parents, a philosophy which distinguished the women's college.
Women students under the age of 21 had to live in a dormitory, and we had light flash. We had to be in by 11 o'clock on weeknights and by 12:30 on weekends. We had to have permission from our parents written and on file in the dean's office in order to go home for the weekend. We had to list who we were going with. If we were not going to be back by 12:30 on Sunday night, we had to either call ahead and let them know, or we would have to go before judiciary and would be campused. And the honor court, the whole thing, it still existed then. It wasn't until the late 60s with the Vietnam turmoil that all of the restrictions on the women were finally lifted, and this lost its women's college aspect.
Even for men, the university resembles a large family. On occasions when small indiscretions lead to arrest, the dean of men is summoned to the jailhouse.
One night I went 3 times after midnight. Went to bed about 12, about 10 after the sergeant called me, had some of my boys. I went down, got them out, went back, undressed, went to bed. That was around 10 after 12. Around about 3, I got another call from him. And went down, took care of that, went back, went to bed again, had my clothes right, just like a fireman, I had my clothes right there. So I got another call from him. I said, Sergeant, I said, I worked all day today. I said, you just came on at 10 o'clock last night now. You're still, calling me. So I went down, and strangely enough, it was 3 fraternity boys that had, at 7 o'clock the evening before, had been in my home, washing my car as a fraternity project, and we'd had them in, had cookies and milk and all, and these 3 boys were down there in the jail. And all they'd done was, you know where DeGraff Hall is? The city had just painted their new beautiful lines on the highway there, Tennessee, and these boys had thought that their fraternity symbols would look a lot better, and so they did that, and that violated Ordinance 5.2 something and all.
But the calm is soon broken. In 1962, a national movement makes its way to FSU. It's called integration.
Well, I remember I went over to the dormitory that Sunday evening to see how things were going. And I ran into a young man, an undergraduate student, who stepped off the elevator. And he looked like he wanted to talk. And I said to him something like, "How are things going?" And he was ashen-faced, and he said, "I just got on the elevator upstairs, and there was a black man on that elevator." He was in shock.
Black students arrive on the FSU campus when the head of science education, J. Stanley Marshall, organizes a summer program for high school teachers. A group of educators from Fort Lauderdale sign up for the course, among them African Americans.
We had a series of meetings in the president's office, and attending those meetings were representatives of the sheriffs, the sheriff of Leon County, the chief of police, and of course the FSU chief of police, Bill Tanner, FBI, an FBI representative at least on one occasion, and Malcolm Johnson, who was then editor of the Tallahassee Democrat. We thought it was very important that we have the Democrats' support, or at least not their resistance, not their objections, because the Democrat then was a pretty conservative in the social sense newspaper. And I remember Malcolm sitting there, sphinx-like, making notes and making no comments. And when I picked up the Tallahassee Democrat on Sunday morning and read the lead editorial by Malcolm Johnson, I sort of knew we were home free, because the editorial, I think the title was Education, Not Agitation. And Malcolm, who carried a lot of weight in this community and in the state, said, "It's time we recognize the importance of education for our people. These black students at Florida State University are coming here to be educated, not to agitate, and those of us in the community would do well to accept them in that spirit." I think that editorial had a lot to do with the peaceable way in which that proceeded.
But local restaurants are slow to warm to the idea. It will take time and personal pleas from the university president before blacks are welcomed at nearby eateries. Among the first full-time black students is Maxwell Courtney, salutatorian of Tallahassee's Lincoln High School. He is only 16 years old when he enrolls at FSU.
I think Maxwell was a man that was prepared for the task, and he was prepared for the times. I don't think I would have been successful here at Florida State, and probably many of us at that time, because I probably didn't have the demeanor or the temperament that Maxwell had. And he was just a fine fella, and you would have liked him. Anyone would have readily accepted him. That was the most surprising thing that I found, that he didn't have a problem with his professors. There was no discrimination or anything like that.
In 1965, Courtney graduates cum laude. The personal pain experienced by early black students is shared by other citizens who dare to expedite their dream. In the fall of 1964, just days after a Board of Control member labels the FSU campus ultra-liberal, Gordon Blackwell announces his resignation. He is to become president of Furman University, his alma mater, and says it is the tug of history that pulls him back home, not a push from overzealous politicians seeking to micromanage, as state editorials suggest. Blackwell is hailed as a leader who often goes to the mat for FSU interest, especially faculty, whose salaries are nearly doubled. Highlights of his presidency include the establishment of an engineering school, attracting students like Norm Thagard, who earns 2 degrees and goes on to become FSU's first astronaut in space and the first American to fly as a cosmonaut. And it's Blackwell's close relationship with University of Florida President Wayne Reitz that undoubtedly helps bring the football game with the Gators to Tallahassee in 1964. 2 months after that contest, FSU's first win over their arch rivals, Blackwell makes a grand exit from the presidency.
I was really touched when they surprised me. I believe it was one January morning just before I left Florida State. They came up and said they were going to throw me in the fountain. which was an act of love, I think, rather than condemnation, because it had been a tradition that when good things happened to people, such as getting engaged, well, students would get thrown in the fountain. And so they took me down, and coat and tie and all, and threw me in the fountain. And I always appreciated that as much as anything that's ever happened to me.
The Westcott Fountain is more than a landmark. It's a tradition. Constructed in 1917, it serves as the very focal point of the institution. A picture postcard passed from one generation of students to the next. It's equally customary for students to leave their calling card at the fountain, and that's when FSU calls on Horace Smith.
We have seen this soap go as high as the bowl part here. We have seen this soap, like when the wind get into it, it would blow all up on the top of the steps of Westcott door.
Smith has been keeper of the Westcott Fountain for nearly a quarter century, where the sometimes stylish activity of the students forces a shutdown cleanup of the fountain some 60 to 70 times a year.
We have more than dye and soap. I have found deer, half a deer meat. And I found dead sharks. Occasionally you'll find a necklace, a ring, things of that nature. Watch it occasionally. I like coming up to homecoming and after homecoming, and don't let them lose the game. Because this is when you find a lot of shoes and clothing and sticks, beer balls, and no money at that time. There's a lot of interesting things around here, you know, but some things just shouldn't be said on camera, you know.
After serving 5 months as acting president, John Champion, at age 42, is tapped for the job full-time in June of 1965. International acclaim follows a year later when Dr. Robert Mulligan, distinguished research professor of chemical physics, brings the first Nobel Prize in science to the state of Florida. Mulligan splits his time between FSU and the University of Chicago, but is in Tallahassee when the award is announced.
And I remember that was one of the most exciting days of my presidency, because phone calls kept coming through as to whether or not Dr. Mulligan would be selected as the Nobel Prize winner. And I can remember when it was announced how excited everybody was, all of the science faculty and the administration. I think everybody was more excited than Dr. Mulligan. He was a very modest person.
Although Champion is determined to maintain FSU's growth in the sciences and arts, the establishment of professional schools is at the top of his priorities. In the spring of 1965, the legislature passes an act creating the Florida State University College of Law and allocates funds for preliminary expenses. It's supposed to be only a startup venture, but State Supreme Court Justice B.K. Roberts encourages the university to strike while the iron is hot, and the project is pushed ahead.
The idea was that this was planning money. Now, there was some confusion as to what planning money meant, but it was interpreted to mean that we were going to start a law school. And the idea was that we should move with as much dispatch as possible before anyone changed their mind about this thing.
Within 8 months, the college has a dean. Mason Ladd comes from Iowa and hires 6 faculty members. The soda shop in the Longmire building is closed to make way for a law library, and in September of 1966, class opens for 116 students.
Dean Ladd stayed here through that first class, and the graduating class went before the Florida Bar, and it's my understanding that it was the first class in the history of Florida who passed the bar on the first sitting, 100%.
Meanwhile, the FSU Circus takes its show across the globe, touring France, Spain, and Italy. It's a milestone trip, the first international performances for the circus, but the significance of the visit will not be fully appreciated until later.
And while they were there, Dean Oglesby, who went with them, he was the Dean of Students at the time, he went with them and he saw how much the students in the circus had gotten out of this particular program. And he came back and he said he thought it would be a wonderful idea if our students could go abroad, pay the same tuition that they pay in Florida, send our faculty over there, and get a center where we could establish a small center. They would take the courses that they would be taking here in certain areas, but they would have the benefit of having the environment and the area where they could share in the experiences overseas.
In 1966, the Florence Study Center opens to such great reviews, the university begins planning another program in London, and eventually the law school opens an exchange with Oxford. Closer to home, events are not as favorable. While the president is out of town, controversy erupts over the president's refusal to allow a student publication to print a profanity-laced story called The Pig Knife. Students hold a sit-in on the steps of Westcott, and some faculty want to censure the president. Sensing a lack of support, Champion resigns. But student body president Larry Gonzalez holds a Landis Green rally in support of Champion.
We felt that he correctly had the responsibility for that publication, and it was published with student dollars, and we felt that it wasn't so much an issue of freedom of speech. Anyone is free to publish materials at their expense, and they can say whatever they wish in them. No one was going through the library and taking books out of the library. This was a question of spending student dollars on a publication, and we felt that that was well within the jurisdiction of the president. And besides that, he had been a great president of our university, and we felt that he should continue.
Champion withdraws his resignation and wins the pig knife battle. But the seeds of protest have been sown. In February of 1969, Champion resigns for good. Stan Marshall is named acting president, and less than a month later, the radical group SDS, Students for a Democratic Society, helped to stamp FSU as a hotbed of activism, a veritable Berkeley of the South. Ignoring a state court injunction, SDS stages a meeting inside a university facility.
The sheriff came out and his staff and my staff, and we issued the injunction down there and asked him to peacefully leave, of course, which we didn't expect him to do, but we gave him the opportunity and exercised a great deal of restraint for a long period of time, trying to get people to just move out and let's get this thing over with. But there was a hard core that insisted on staying. And it finally was a point where, okay, it's time to put up or shut up. Some of the outside crowd becoming very vocal and very aggressive, and a little on the threatening side. And the sheriff gave the order to his troops to fix bayonets.
Some 200 protesters are arrested, and the event lives in infamy as the Night of the Bayonets. But the fury of '69 is not yet over.
was swimming at a friend's swimming pool one Sunday afternoon about 2 o'clock, and a telephone call came through saying Westcott's on fire. So I jumped into a pair of shorts and came down here.
The fire starts spontaneously in the 4th floor art department. Ceilings water-soaked by fire hoses fall on the 2nd and 3rd floors.
And I remember I didn't have my keys with me, so I got a fireman to axe open the desk and got the papers out that I thought should be protected, and stood there pretty much while we watched Westcott burn.
7 years will pass before Westcott is fully renovated and occupied. Coming up on part 2 of the history of Florida State University, war protesting reaches a peak behind a student activist named Radical Jack.
I've learned that many times it's you get a lot more with honey than vinegar. And sometimes you have to compromise on secondary things in order to reach more substantial goals. And at that time, it was more of an all-or-nothing approach.
Soon, the FSU campus gains national attention for a new form of protest as the birthplace of streaking.
And when I turned around, I looked down Jefferson Street, and here was this wave of naked people running at me down Jefferson Street. My first thought was, why are they running at me? What do hundreds of naked people want with me?
The decade of the 70s is marked by 2 great recruiting coups, the first for a Nobel Prize winner.
We went to, Bob Lawton was the Dean of Arts and Sciences. And so we went to see Bob Lawton, and Bob Lawton was a Shakespeare scholar. And I remember telling him, you know, here he doesn't know anything about who Paul Dirac is. And I said, you know, suppose somebody told you that Shakespeare wanted to come to the university. That's about the extent of it as far as Feathers is concerned. Would you be interested? He said, absolutely, of course.
The other for a football coach.
My feeling on discipline is like if I can copy somebody, which is about all I do, is holding a bird in your hand. If you hold it too tight, you'll squeeze it to death, and if you hold it too lightly, it'll get away. So I believe in discipline, but there's a just right that you got to have, and that's what I'm gonna have.
One of the most beloved presidents in FSU history opens a reign that will span 3 decades.
And when I meet students today, of course I meet a lot of students that were here in 15-some years, they tell me I came to your ice cream social. I don't think a lot of them came because there couldn't have been that many that came who tell me they came.
And the university lands one of the most important research labs in the world.
And I predict confidently that for years and years to come, scientific headlines and bulletins around the world will be datelined Tallahassee, Florida.
All this and more as the history of FSU reaches the 70s, 80s, and 90s.
At Columbia's hospitals, we know what counts in an emergency. It's knowing you can get comprehensive, immediate attention 24 hours a day from highly trained professionals with years of experience and with the advanced technology to quickly diagnose and treat your emergency, skillfully, carefully, and compassionately. Because at the Columbia family of hospitals, we know what counts most in an emergency. You.